So welcome back, class. So today we're going to finish up chapter 5 on planning. This is part 2 of the lecture. And so make sure I'm sharing this. Okay. All right, so here is the agenda for today. Basically, we're going to wrap up planning by talking specifically about goals, goals being one of the central features of a plan. So just to sort of recap, just do something here. I want to do that. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to recap what we covered in the first lecture on planning. And so in that first lecture, we defined planning as involving setting goals and then deciding how to achieve them, right? So the central feature of a plan is the goal. As we went through, I pointed out that all of the different plans have to be linked together as part of the business's strategy. And so that idea is captured in this diagram. And so basically the way planning will work for a company is you essentially begin with those founding statements that define the type of company that you are. And those are the mission statements, vision statements, and value statements. From those, you're going to build the top management team at the executive level. We'll build the strategic plan. And the strategic plan will have, obviously, goals attached to them. Then middle management will devise their own plans according to the strategic plan, and which will have its own separate goals. And then the operational plan will be derived from the tactical plan and done by the middle managers. And those operational plans, again, will have their own sets of goals, and those will be done by the front line or the first line managers. And so that's basically sort of the big picture look at the way planning is done in a company. And so like I mentioned, the central feature of a plan is a goal, right? The whole idea of a plan is that you are trying to achieve some goal. And a goal is defined here as a specific commitment to achieve a measurable result within a stated period of time. So there's several adjectives that I think are important here. And we're going to, in a couple of slides ahead, we're going to get into specifically what an effective goal looks like, but it's going to have some of these features. It's going to have to be specific. It's going to be something that has to be measurable, and there has to be a time associated with it. And then goals can be divided into short-term goals and long-term goals. Long-term goals are anything over a year. Typically, these long-term goals will tend to span 1 to 5 years, and those are your strategic goals. And those are goals that are set at the highest level. And then from those goals, tactical or operational goals are derived, and those are your short-term goals, right? And those are the sort of frontline managers that will be implementing those. So an operating plan is a plan that breaks down your long-term goals or your long-term targets, what comes from the strategic plan, into short-term targets or goals, right? And then, so if you think about sort of the way this process will work, you start with your strategy, which is your longest term goals, and each of those goals are broken down into shorter and shorter term goals. So the operating plan will sort of break down your strategy into shorter term targets, and then your action plan is the steps you need to take, or your tactics, in order to achieve those goals. And in here, a distinction is made between stand-in plans and single-use plans. I mean, this is not all that important. There's a bunch of terms I throw up here that you will likely encounter, so it's good to know the definitions of those terms. But a stand-in plan is a plan for activities that occur repeatedly over time. So like, you know, if you need to, let's say, give a refund, right? That's something that you're going to be regularly doing, issuing refunds. And so the plan to do that would be a stand-in plan, because it wouldn't be executed just one time. And of course, a single-use plan will be a plan that's executed just once. So goals, you know, are pretty obvious in what they are, right? It's some end that you want to achieve. It seems obvious, but there's actually a lot of research that was done, which can make goals more effective, both in increasing performance, right? So it improves your ability to achieve the goals, but also as a way to motivate workers to put in maximum effort towards achieving that goal. And so there's actually there's a whole stream of research on this topic of what goes into designing an effective goal. And one very popular approach to this is something called a SMART goal. And SMART is just an acronym for the different features that go into this type of goal. So the S stands for specific, and so the goal has to be stated in a specific rather than vague terms. Right? So the idea here is that you don't want to just say, I want to improve the customer experience, right? That's not specific enough. That is way too general, and it's very vague. You want to do things like you want to decrease returns by 10%, right? That's a little bit more specific. The other feature is it has to be measurable, and whenever possible, goals should be measurable or quantifiable. So, you know, if your goal is a reduction in customer returns, you want to state that goal so that you can actually measure whether you've achieved it or not. So instead of just saying a reduction in customer returns, you want to state it, like as an example, you want to reduce customer returns by, let's say, 10%. The other feature is it has to be attainable, right? So goals should be challenging, but they also have to be realistic and attainable. So goals are an opportunity for progress, to push your organization further. So you want to set goals that you know, improve your organization, contribute to its progress, right? You just don't want to maintain sort of the status quo. So there's got to be a degree of ambition that goes into the goals that you set, but they also have to be realistic. If you shoot for goals that are unattainable, that will affect the motivation, and we'll get a little bit more into that in the next couple of slides. The other feature is that it needs to be results oriented. I've also seen this expressed as being relevant. So instead of using the word results for the R in SMART, you can use relevance. And so they should be results oriented, or they should be relevant to your organization's vision. It has to be aligned with the overall strategy of the company. And then the last feature that goes into a SMART goal is target dates. And so you need to specify when the goals will actually be accomplished. So when is it that you are going to achieve whatever end or result you are striving for, right? So use an example of a reduction in customer returns. You want to state that maybe as an example, you want to achieve a 10% reduction in customer returns within 6 months, right? So that attaches a target date to that goal. And I gave my own example here of a SMART goal that would apply to me. And so just to sort of tie this all together, so when you create your goals, right, your goals are part of a plan, and that plan is part of a sequence of plans, or a chain of plans that are all connected together to create a cohesive strategy for the company, right? So it starts in the most general of terms with the mission, vision, and value statements. And from that, a strategy is going to be devised by upper management. And then it's the job of middle managers to take that strategy and generate goals, generate plans that are specific to whatever's relevant to that middle manager's function, right? So, so they will relate it specifically to the department, let's say, that they are responsible for. And then those plans will be further revised to the specific needs of, let's say, frontline managers, right? So they're all sort of connected in this cohesive way, so that this overall plan has all of these goals attached to them in a context that's relevant to the workers that are carrying that plan out. And so if we go back to the Baruch example, and let me see if I can bring up these. What I want to do is I want to bring up this slide from yesterday. Let me see if I can find that. Just going through, I am looking for the Baruch, okay, mission and vision statement. Okay, here's what I am looking for. I have found it. Let me see if I can change the share here. Okay. Okay, so I believe what you are saying, hopefully what you are saying, apologize for that. So I believe what you're saying is the mission and vision statements of Baruch College. Let me just confirm. Okay. All right. I think so. I think you're saying the mission and vision statements of Baruch College. This is just a slide that I showed in the first lecture. But I just brought this up just to highlight what at the strategy level Baruch is trying to accomplish, right? And so one part of their mission is not only to educate students, but it's also to create new knowledge through scholarship and research. And so part of my professional responsibilities is to conduct research, right? And so I'm part of that component of Baruch College's mission that creates the scholarship and research. And so from that, the upper level executives of Baruch College are going to establish goals related to how they can become, how can they create new knowledge through scholarship and research. And obviously, the way to do that is to conduct scientific studies that get published in scientific journals. And so my department will set goals for what the faculty is going to achieve as far as their publications go. And so I actually meet with senior faculty in order to devise plans for my specific career in meeting research goals. And so through that, that's an example of how Baruch College starts with a mission and vision statement. And let me just switch the share here. Okay. So Baruch College starts with a mission and vision statement. And from that, sort of an executive team develops specific goals for realizing that mission and vision. And those goals are translated at different levels depending on who will be sort of pursuing those goals. So there's a group at the executive level who creates a strategy. That strategy is then translated into specific goals that have to do with the department that I work for. And then those department goals are then translated at sort of the front line by creating goals specific to me as sort of like a frontline worker who's in the business of producing scholarship and research. So, from that very general sort of mission and vision of creating knowledge, you have now a SMART goal at the frontline level that looks something like this. And so this was a SMART goal that I created for myself. And it reads, I will submit a working paper on how internal locus of control positively mediates the relationship between solution writing and psychological well-being to management science by December 15th, 2020. So it's very specific. So I'm going to conduct a very specific research study. And I'm going to submit that research study for publication to a particular journal. And I have to accomplish that by December 15th, right? And so this is part of a plan at the frontline level within a university whose mission it is to create new knowledge through scholarship and research, right? And so all of that work gets done by creating plans that have a goal that you're trying to achieve, and then developing plans, developing tactics in order to achieve those goals. And then the kinds of goals that you're actually going to set are SMART goals. This is one type of goal that it's very popular. It's used often within organizations, and it is an evidence-based practice. It is proven to be effective not only in improving performance, right? So it enables you to better actually reach your goals, but it also acts as a motivating force. So let me get back to this. Here we go. Okay, so hopefully this switch happens on my screen share. All right, so, and we touched a little bit on this when we defined what a SMART goal is, but this just sort of highlights one feature that's very important. That is, you don't want your goal to be too easy. If it's too easy, no one will put in any effort. And you also don't want your goal to be too hard, because if it's too hard, then people won't even try, right? And so the sweet spot is the kinds of goal that sort of pushes the boundaries to that, you know, moves your organization forward, but it's within the capabilities of the organization. And, you know, it's not always clear as to, you know, where to find that spot. You know, and there are examples of, you know, organizations who are very deliberate in trying to push that boundary as far as possible, right? So I know that I bring up Elon Musk often, but he is a well-known example of someone who establishes goals that are very ambitious. And part of what he's known for as an entrepreneur is to promise things within a certain period of time, and to consistently miss those sort of deadlines that he sets for himself. And so recently he famously set a deadline for himself in producing a certain amount of his Model 3 cars per week. I forget what the numbers are, something like 5,000 cars per week by the end of 2018 or something like that. And then he failed to achieve that. And as he's often setting up goals that his company is failing to achieve. He set up very ambitious goals about how he's going to have full self-driving within his cars, and he hasn't achieved that. He eventually does achieve his goals, but they're never really within the time frame that he sets. It's not clear if his public sort of proclamations about what he's trying to achieve are identical to what he's doing in-house with his organizations. But if we just were to assume that the goals he shares with the public are the same goals that he is setting for his organization, then one question you would have as a manager is, how is that hurting performance? Are the goals a little bit too aggressive? So those are, that would be a question that would need answering, and you would need to sort of conduct a study to see, you know, to what degree that might be having a negative impact on the performance of his organization. But, you know, the main takeaway here is it's not very clear exactly where that line is, where a goal becomes too difficult or too easy. So I mean, basically that is the whole planning process. You know, it starts with your mission, vision, and value statements. Strategies are developed, and those are then translated into more specific goals, shorter term goals by the different levels of management within your organization. And then the kinds of goals that you actually set within those plans are goals that are going to generate, not only going to be motivating, but are going to generate results for you. And SMART goals are the types of goals that are very effective in accomplishing that. So management by objectives is this sort of approach to running an organization. It's running an organization from one objective to another. And management by objectives is a process made famous by Peter Drucker in like the 1950s. And objectives is really just another word for goals. So your work, this would sort of be what your work would look like as a manager. And so Drucker created this 4-step process of using the pursuit of goals and the establishment of goals as a way to sort of manage an organization. And so the first step is that the managers and employees jointly set objectives or goals for the employee, right? And so in my example, I sit down with the senior scholars in the management department, and we talk about what some of my goals are. And so we construct those together. Managers then develop an action plan, right? And an action plan is a way to help you accomplish those goals, right? They have the experience in doing this kind of work, so they help guide me so that I can be successful in achieving them. And then the managers and employees periodically review the employee's performance. And then based on that review, managers make a performance appraisal and reward the employee according to results, right? And so that is sort of in a nutshell, a part of the management, sort of like the daily tasks of running an organization from a manager's perspective. It's setting goals, and then making sure there are effective action plans in place to realize those goals. As part of Drucker's system of management by objectives, he created 3 categories of objectives. And so there's a performance objectives, behavioral objectives, and learning objectives. And so performance objectives are just outcome-based. It's like the end result. So in my example, the end result for me would be publication or submission of a study to a journal. Behavioral objectives are behavioral in nature, right? And so something for me would be, let's say, to attend 2 relevant conferences during the academic year, right? So that would be a behavioral objective. I would have to, go and attend academic conferences. And then the last category are learning objectives. And here, obviously, the goal here is to acquire knowledge or competencies. And so for something like this, a learning objective for me, and by the way, I mean, all of these are the kinds of goals or objectives that are established for me when I work with the senior scholars in the department. And so, we do talk about behavioral objectives, right, which would be me sort of attending conferences. Certainly we talk about performance objectives. Those are probably the most obvious, but also learning objectives as well. And so depending on the kind of scientific study I was conducting, I usually have to do some kind of unique analysis. And, statistics is actually an evolving field, and there's always new methods developed to sort of better analyze the data that you have to work with. And so, a learning objective often for me is to learn some new statistical technique to account for some anomaly, like in my data set or something like that. So those are the 3 different types of objectives, and each of those categories, you're going to be devising goals within. All right, and this is a point that I made earlier, which is the idea of cascading goals, making your lower level goals align with the top goals. And again, they're all connected. That's the main idea here. It begins with your mission, vision, and value statements. From that, a strategy is devised, right? And then technical plans are implemented. From them, frontline plans are devised and goals are created for those on a more of a short-term basis, and all of them are connected. And in my case, with Baruch College, my goal of publishing a scientific study is obviously connected to the strategic goal of establishing Baruch College as an organization that creates new knowledge and scholarship. So that is the basic idea here. One of the things that they mention is that in order for this whole process to be successful, everyone has to be committed to it. So top management has to be committed to the strategic goals and all of the goals that the lower levels are aligned with. So that is important, that you got buy-in from top management. And also the goals must be applied organization-wide. This only works when everybody is sort of on the same page and working towards the same ends, because it's obviously a collaborative effort within an organization to achieve organizational goals. And then I think we are coming to the end here. But this is another important feature of creating goals, and that is the importance of deadlines. Deadlines, I mean, it's just very, very clear. Deadlines do have an impact on behavior. It gets you to focus your energy and focus your effort and focus your attention on the aspects of your plan that are most important. And, you know, we have this inherent desire, or a lot of us do, all of us do to some degree, an inherent desire to procrastinate, right? We want to avoid some of maybe the more difficult aspects of a plan that we have to actually do. And deadlines are a way of forcing you to get the work that you need to get done, to do that work that you need to get done. And so deadlines are very effective. You as a student are in a very deadline intensive environment. And so it could be, it does get, I mean, look, I've been a student for a very, very long time. So I know what you're experiencing. It can get pretty intense. There are lots of deadlines here in this course, right? We have deadlines every week. And as a reminder, we have a very important deadline coming up this Sunday. I know I talk about that a lot. But, you know, all of the assignments that you have to do as a student, there's deadlines attached to them. And when they write about this in the textbook, the question that they pose is, how much of this would you have done if there wasn't a deadline, right? So if there wasn't that deadline this Sunday, how much of that work and all of those assignments, those exercises you have to do each week, how much of that would have gotten done? And the answer is very clear, a lot less. So we know that deadlines are effective. And so as you construct your own goals and plans in the work that you do, and by the way, all of this not only applies to your work life, but it also applies to your personal life as well, right? These strategies are very effective for getting anything done, right? They apply to your student life. Creating plans, understanding where you're headed and devising that in a plan, using goals that are smart is a very powerful way of, you know, moving things forward in your life, right? It's a very powerful way of generating results and progress. And, you know, so it doesn't just work in the workplace, right? It works for you as a student, and it'll work for you in your personal life. And so it's a very effective practice to adopt in everything that you do. Creating plans and SMART goals that have deadlines attached to them is an idea that actually works. It's very effective. So, and I think that sort of covers everything about goals. And again, I mean, so SMART goals aren't the only type. And so if you begin to research this, and perhaps in your other courses, other types might be introduced to you, but there's different versions of it. However, I think almost everyone knows about SMART goals, and they are without question effective. And then so the last section here is putting this all together in what's described as the planning control cycle. And so there's just 4 steps that wrap up the entire sort of planning process. And it's the 2 planning steps It's the two planning steps of making the plan and then carrying out the plan, and then the two control steps, which is controlling the direction by comparing the results with the plan. So obviously when you construct a plan, you want to measure your performance and see to what degree you are on track to realize the goals that you had set. And then based on that evaluation, you need to make an adjustment to the actual plan that you've put in place. So like improving future plans or correcting for deviations in carrying out those plans. And that pretty much ends the planning chapter. Now these two control steps, there's a whole section that's going to be dedicated to control. So we'll get into that in much greater detail in the future. But otherwise, that ends this lecture. And as always, if you have any questions about any of the content that we cover, feel free to send me an email. I know we don't really have an opportunity to ask questions on these pre-recorded lectures. And I'll just make one final point before I close up. This was a question that was raised in one of my sections. And the content that I cover in my lectures is the content I will draw from in creating your midterm and final exam. So you're not going to get any questions on any topic that I didn't cover within the actual lectures. In the weekly quizzes, obviously, those are derived from the actual textbook company. And so those questions will be questions specifically on the content in the chapter. And I'm not going to cover all of the content in the chapter. So just relying on the lectures for those weekly quizzes may not be enough. So again, you have to read the chapter in the textbook in order to do well on those weekly quizzes. But for your midterm and your final, the only thing you're going to be tested on is the content that I cover in my lectures. All right, so that does it. Have a great weekend, and I will see you all next week.